The session therefore is opened officially, and we are starting with our program for day 2. As outlined there, the program is going to be just as is, except for 2 minor changes. The first change is that if you look in today's program, we have the registration and tea at 10 o'clock or until 10 o'clock. And then instead of the FFC giving us the research and recommendations or recommendation cycle, we are going to have PPO. That item that was after lunch, it's going to be lifted up to the FFC 1 because Dr. Yanchi says to leave, his flight is leaving this early this day of today. Therefore, the FFC presentation and interactions will go to after lunch at the place of that one that was occupied by PPO. The second announcement is that we are to have a presentation, by the BRRR in the oversight that regarding the amendment process and the drawing of the BBRs. That one will be done virtually. So we would request that our technical team should be around, the legislature technical team should be around, so that it is not left go dog COC, but the technical team, the IT team, the IT guys should be stationed here, so that when that time comes, we don't get glitches. We get exactly into the briefing. So if that can be sorted. And also testing whether it works should be done in between the speakers, closer to that period. I could see that you were busy on that. Thanks for that. So that by that time we are not delayed by that. Yesterday we covered a lot of ground, and I think also the interactions were good, and therefore we will be able to pick up where we left today. I think there were a lot, honorable members, that came up around whether it is the strength or the capacity or even the functionality and the expectations of the committee as a new committee, which was indicating that the committee has done or covered a lot of ground, and up to now, the targets it had met, even if there might have been changes in dates, like the workshop that we are having now, which was meant to have happened at some time. But what is critical is that what was planned does happen, which I think we need to applaud the chair of chairs around that. I think also what was recognized yesterday was the issue of the capacity of the committee, both in the form of resources, that is finances, but also most critically with the issue of the human resource. I think Dr. Yanchis even made a proposal that, or a suggestion, or an advice, that maybe we need to start with the head of the team that would lead this section and not be broad if we are having human financial resource problems that are surrounding us. But also the other important advice that he gave is that then on issues of dealing with the staffing, when that time comes, then that person that would have been the head would then be able to deal with those issues. so that as politicians we don't meddle ourselves with that process. To prove that we are doing well as this committee in the legislature, we even got from the presentations that were made internally yesterday or by the internal team that there are indications of certain provinces that want to benchmark with us instead of us, as we always talk about going and benchmarking with other provinces. So there are other provinces that are indicating their interest to come, and one of those is KZN. And I think also the Northern Province was also mentioned in that regard. So I think that is encouraging, Honorable Duba, that it shows that we are doing some work. And it means, therefore, that we need to continue doing so. The issues of fiscal allocation were dealt with, the allocations to the different provinces and how the provinces are performing were also dealt with. So which means we know where we stand in relation as to whether it is the grants, the equitable share or the conditional grants. But also that in the discussions that came up yesterday, there were clear indications that members are saying we need, especially the Fiscal Commission, the FFC, to assist us in advancing the plight of the Eastern Cape as a rural province, and therefore also the issue of the formula that is used to be looked at. So those critical and important discussions were made yesterday. But also on the issue, Honorable Chair of Chairs, of looking at our own systems in relation as to the regulatory framework, our internal one in the form of the rules of the House, that we need to ensure that there are particular reviews on certain clauses that are done, especially on the issues of around the processing of the bills and the taking of decisions around that, and the roles of the MECs vis-a-vis the role of the committee and the role, therefore, by extension of the legislature on the issue of money bills. So basically, a number of issues that are affecting the operations of the committee, either financially or generally, were touched yesterday. But most importantly, the functionality of the committee, which was emphasized to be anchored around it being resourced, was the issue that was stressed. I will be failing, Deputy Chair of Chairs, if I don't mention that as much as there were discussions that we need to consider how we deal with the issues of the budget vis-a-vis the funding and the allocations towards the legislature and the committee. But there was finally a recommendation that we need to meet as the committee, and there should be a meeting between the committee and Treasury and whoever is necessary in order to massage the way going towards the adoption of the budgets. Basically, it is that, and without wasting time, I will then now, towards the end of this of the program, that is why I don't want to get into much detail. The chair will come, give us a way forward, and also emphasize on those issues. But I felt that because I have to wrap, even for those that were that might not have been here, there are critical decisions that were taken yesterday, and there was very important work that was done. We will quickly then move with the agenda or the program for today, and I hope and call Dr. Yanchis to come and oh, sorry, and come and make the presentation. Over to you. We are going to whilst he's readying himself, we are going to strengthen on the approach that we used yesterday, that of saving time. If you handle me well, we'll be out of here by 1 o'clock. So if we are not here, we are still here by 1 o'clock, it will be because you have delayed me. Otherwise, my intention is that by 1 o'clock we all go home. Over to you, Doc.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, honour members. I feel like it's a strict punchline towards my presentation that I must stick to the limited time. Thank you so much. You know, I wanted to sit on this seat. I always see members sitting on this seat, so I thought to myself, today I must not leave without having sit on this chair, you know, feel like a member as well. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I think, Chair, I'll just quickly do, and thank you so much for agreeing to make provisions for my request to leave a bit earlier today. But it's been a very great time, and I really enjoyed myself, as I always really enjoy myself when I'm down here at home. I think, just a quick recap, I think what I did yesterday, try to do at least, was to really, Chair and members and colleagues, to share a justification for the need for this act in the legislature and the Eastern Cape, that it's in law that this act should have been in place over time, and it's timely that the legislature have went on and provide leadership in establishing this legislation, and it's you know, it's similar to what has happened at the national level, but also argued for how much having this legislation here, this act here, will transform, in my view, the oversight model, in more elevating it to be more targeted at really using you know, the approaches to assess the impact of budget in really dealing with the provincial socio-economic challenges. So I think, in my view, I'm arguing that. I've argued that at the national level. This is a very important transformational on the transformation, on the oversight model of the legislature. And clearly, we also try to show some of the clear deterioration and status of the social economic situation in the province, from which really clearly set out the work of the legislature in dealing with these issues and using this legislature as a powerful tool to try and deal with those things, in particular also on the issues around public finances, how the public finance of the province as well will be aided by this legislation to ensure the delivery of the services. But also the point I didn't emphasize a lot on yesterday was around the importance of having a political champion. What I said to colleagues I often say is that having a Money Bills Act requires a political champion to get it through or to get it implemented. And I'm quite happy with the leadership of Honorable Duba and the members of the committee have really spearheaded the work, because my experience, without a political champion on this particular process, it doesn't go far. And the example is at the Gauteng. My argument there is that the delay in the process in Gauteng legislature is a lack of an obvious political champion to take this forward within the political environment in this regard. So that's very important. I see a lot of that. There's a wide acceptance within the legislature, wide members, in seeing the importance of this role. So it's very important in that regard. Today, what I'll try to do, Chair and members, is really quickly run through some of the context, because yesterday we plotted out the context at which this office will work, or this legislation will work. But now what I want to do is I want to share some of the experience around the capacity required to do this work or to put this in place, and quickly share some of the processes at the division of NCOP from which the legislature can use the act to actually influence such processes. I'll try to move with the speed and try to cover some of these aspects. What I didn't do yesterday, I didn't have time to spend on the budget office and how it's established and the purpose and how.
Honorable members, with the presentation that you have with you, that doc is presenting, there are certain changes that he has done. So the documents that you have might not be the same or might not be similar, perfectly similar with what he is presenting. So doc, usisebenzile. So it would rather assist to listen to him more, because you might be lost checking in your documents, because he has made some changes, and I'm hearing about that now as well. So, sorry for that. Over to you, Keto.
Thanks so much. I do apologize. I was actually coming there to try and tell members that last night I tried to match the slides.
Hayi kaloku Doc, hayi.
Actually,
Qhuba wena
all right,
ngosanda
all right.
ukuncancela
No,
ngoku.
Engos, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I was just coming. Thank you so much, Chair. So the issues that, I had done some of the discussion around the budget office as a one form of capacity that the legislature has went as an approach to take to strengthen the implementation of the act. And I think we've got a very standard presentation that we do, but I think I want to share with the members that actually there is a context around it to say clearly the way the legislature is set up, it does requires, it's inherent that legislature will always require such capacity. Globally is a very similar situation where we realize that actually there has been more demand from the legislatures, more oversight in particular, and that requires a level of technical capabilities that needs to be strengthened. Given that we see governments have so much capabilities and capacity to deliver on services, and legislature are also justified to also have such capacity to be able to oversight of such a huge capabilities from the government side. And we've seen the literature around as well. Many legislatures around the world has went on to really strengthen the capacity, and the provincial legislature as well, Eastern Cape, is well within its right to try to have this capacity. Otherwise, the act will be less effective as you want it to be. And this phenomena of a budget office is a long-standing phenomena within the legislature as well. You see the history coming back from back then, the oldest budget office being that of the Ugandan in the continent. And that, in a way, transcends really a lot to say the type of legislature we have to a certain extent determine the level of a human and institutional capabilities that you require to do the work of oversight. And clearly we see that the different kinds of legislatures around the world and you group them within those two groupings, being either the budget influencing, budget approving, and also budget making. We've seen that in the US, the legislature can propose budgets over that of the executive, and hence they have a very huge budget office, I think made up of more than 240 staff members, because they can propose an alternative budget. In South Korea is the same case as well. But obviously in South African context, our constitution lay out clearly, as Advocate Beja mentioned that yesterday, we can only amend. We can't propose as a legislature. So capacity doesn't have to be as huge as that be. I think it always helps us to jog our minds when we think about the kind of capacity we want to have. And I think, Chair, as I mentioned yesterday, it's important to have that capacity. Otherwise, the work of the committee of the legislature will be very constrained in that regard. South African context as well is why I'm going to share the experiences, which also enables the legislature as well to take some of the experiences and build into their model of budget office or capability of support that you want to have. It involved similar approach of consultation as you're doing in the legislature, and also that came up with some of the mechanisms in terms of what specific work that the office has to do. We really provide analysis around macroeconomic and fiscal policy and any other budget-related matters. And we obviously look at, different committees and so on, how we work. We don't only serve one, but we serve widely the committees, and there has been a lot of discussion lately that, look, maybe let's widen the support of the office within the whole committees of Parliament, given that the budget affects entire oversight model. But also having a clear oversight model of the office also matters to be captured quite well in the Act, that this is how accountability office takes place, and so on. And clearly mentioned that when you establish the office, it must have its own capacity, and this is how you capacitate it. And one important determination also, which was very important, was to give us the powers to actually, as an office, to request information from any organ of state as part of our role. Because sometimes we had difficulties where departments would not provide information on time and entities not provide information. So that's very important to capture that within the structure. Clear governance framework, the office is accountable to Parliament, as I mentioned earlier on, a report to the Speaker and the Chairperson of NCOP, and also there is the role that's played by the committees that we support in part of being oversight mechanisms, sort of a board in place which really oversee some of these mechanisms where, as a director, I must consult that board as well. Very small outfit compared to our peers in other countries, very, very small. And I say the current positional structure, which the proposals we made to really shift that a little bit to widen the support, particularly on focus on specific functions, function on education, healthcare, and really have a regular analysis that we produces for the committees, for the members, which they can use as part of oversight over government regard. We've got 3 functions: economics, policy, and finance function. Each and every function has its resources from which it's provide that analysis. And really, this at the back of the understanding of how much there has been a need for such capacity to be built within the legislatures, given that the legislatures are given the powers to allocate the budget. Somebody was saying yesterday, I remember was saying yesterday that legislature allocates budgets, yet they get the less limited resources on it. It's true. The Constitution says the legislature is the one that allocates the budget, but of course, you need capacity to be able to grind in and determine some of these processes. We've seen a lot of legislatures establishing this in the continent as well. We've seen a lot of this. And then there are some sort of generic principles say you need to have these kind of specialization within the office. But I think more importantly, it's an issue of choosing what work you need to do, what work you want this office to do for you. Particularly, what we do often have regular quarterly briefs on policy, on budgets, on programs, on spending, or what else you want to do at starting and so on. That obviously drives the level of people, of human capacity, also institutional capacity, because what we also do is modeling exercises where we have to have models that we have in the office which we use to counter or to counter the government's proposals as well. So look, our model says different from what you're saying, and that requires a very capable capacity thereof. Lastly, is around looking at the model of how we do our work, because you see that we're a very small outfit. We had to develop a model in terms of how we've got 490 members. So how do we make sure that we support all the committees, all members, without giving preference to one over the other? We had to develop a model where we say, when committees want some analysis to us, the chairperson of the committee write a formal request, budget office, we want you to do this for us, and can you get this after a certain time? That helps a lot, particularly in operationalizing the office and operations the act as well. Today, what is a working model of the office? Over time, 6 weeks cycle, and it's important to understand the 6 cycle because there has been a lot of debate and discussion in terms of how this 6-week cycle affect the provincial legislature's processes and how we can fit into that. And it's in my view, I always argue that I don't think this has been completely exhausted, and there could be spaces to propose amendment coming from the provinces going to the National Custom Province, which the processes, the rules allows that to filter in. We've got also appropriations and also adjustment process later in the stage. So the 6-week cycle of looking at division of revenue, the colleagues have derived into these specific stages where the national treasury present to the committee, and then such presentation is shared with the permanent members going down to the provinces, and then from there, there's feedback coming from the provinces. I think the sense here, the view is that the provinces or the legislature don't have to wait for this process. Already there would have been work done, and when this loop comes back, because by the time February proposals are made, you already have that time until this time to actually engage with the proposals, and in the view when the feedback loops back into the national, you would have had time to propose amendments if you feel that should be the case. Of course, it's within the context of the revenue bill, but my argument is about a fiscal framework. It's really space of seeing how the debates around the fiscal framework in the province can be filtered through to the national through all these processes. Once it's done, the provincial committees prepare the financial the final mandate we sent through to the Act. I think the main challenge is there within the 6 weeks process has always been whether the processes, the timeframes are very tight-lipped within the MT, particularly at the MTBPS level. I know Honorable Charles de Beer used to complain in previous term that, you know, it means they don't have Christmas. They have to stay until the middle of December to try to deal with this. Some of the provinces do not understand this 6-week cycle and how they can play into a space. But I think as we unpack the implementation of the provincial legislature, this cycle, provincial legislatures, money bills, this cycle could also help in understanding where you can use your money bills to influence the process thereof. National Council of Province, same as equal footing as a National Assembly. There's always been debate, you know, which, you know, sometimes lack of public knowledge, that it's the same footing with the National Assembly, and its mandate and the roles are seen together as a legislative authority within the national legislature. Hence, I was saying earlier on, the roles, the work that we do here, we use money bills to influence the National Council of Provinces, and that can filter back to an entire national legislature. The Section 8 provides for the powers of the council, similar or equal to that of the National Assembly, but I think more importantly, obviously, with the NCOP largely focused on the bills or legislation that affects the provinces. The council can propose amendments, reject legislation in line with the rules, but also they can initiate own amendments to the money bills in particular, but cannot propose own money bills in that regard. The Act, the constitutions also set out clear rules that Genevieve House set out their own rules in terms of how it works and how it interfaces with the NCOP, with the provinces, that also set out within the rules as well. Rule 86 also set out clearly what kind of, how the council works and how various committees are established and what some of these subcommittees or committees rules are. In my sense, that they're quite similar to that at the legislature. Of course, with the National Council of Provinces, some clear linkage with the NA, looking at the widely national legislation that impacts on it. But it's through these committees that this work are taken on, and they're shared through to the provinces as well. And our determination, what kind of members you have, there's permanent members, there's other members who are elected, and each how they participate or how they influence the debate or the work of the council there. There are, of course, general powers, what the council has to do over time, and the fact that in its own being, the committees of the council have similar powers that of any other committee to summon, to perform, normal representing the council, normal functions of the committee, or take on responsibility of the council as a whole and report back to the council with strict rules, specific rules there. In processing the legislation, clear rules in how such are followed, similar to in the province. The select committees on which the council will refer these legislation or these proposals to these committees on different functions and what should take place. The committees set out the rules themselves and how to engage with the proposals and whether to engage with the bill itself or engage with the initiators of the legislation and follow through that process and feed back to the council in a reporting sense and providing report of once that bill has been processed, with importance of public participation taking place, and which with the assumption is that when the committees discuss these proposals, the provinces would have been represented by their membership within those committees in particular. So it's very important to influence those, because when you influence those from the provinces, you're also influencing the national aspect of it. And my view that the bill will come very greatly in that regard. We also consult other committees affected by the bill, if there are any, and also when make amendments, and how does it impact the rest of the bill, and whether it impacts other stakeholders within the value chain of that, of processing the bill. I feel like I'm moving quite quick. There are also rules there on how to process the money bills through these committees, specifically Rule 2240 on about 6 weeks. But as I said earlier on, the arm mechanism from these 6 weeks can be extended, but obviously there has to be clear indication why this rules are extended, particularly if there's a substance issues raised by the members within the legislatures themselves, and that has not happened. And my view is that there's strong sense that even if there's a consensus, there's a limit, constricted times, there hasn't been even a strong case for actually making the changes. And I feel that having such act in place, the Money Bills Act in the province, would enable the legislature to propose such substantive changes if the legislature feel so. And of course, when as part of the process of legislation, there's a space where amendments could be made within the money bills, but largely those which affect the provinces, and the council can make proposals for those that are widely outside the impact of the outside the effects of, or seen not to be directly impacting the provinces, as opposed to those affecting where there can be direct proposed amendments into those, or making amendments to those. Where there are differences between the NA and the NCOP, there are mechanisms to really measure difference. One of the interesting debate was around the electoral bill, where there seemed to have been the NA, NCOP making more changes on that, and I've seen a lot of those, and there's a mechanism to deal with those differences in the council. So meaning there can be a difference between the NCOP and NA about a particular bill or particular proposals, and the rules allows for such to be taken on board. And once there is that, there's a rules established the mediation process. Very importantly, there's always a need for public involvement. One of the reasons why our Money Bills Act was amended in the previous administration was that there hasn't been much public involvement, public participation in the budget process in particular, and also at the provincial level. My sense is that the aspect of the provincial public participation level has not been taken into account to filter into the national aspects, because even though the national money bills has made it flexible to say, when processing money bills, you can follow this process. However, you can go beyond that timeline, and they use the word reasonable time after, meaning you can place around with that. Even you have 16 days for fiscal framework or 35 days for Division of Revenue Act, you can still go beyond that, and allows more public participation, in particular, to contribute in that state. And the strong argument we've placed that that timeline has not been fully exhausted. And hence government is quite comfortable to say you can't amend because they have not really fully exhausted that processes. Chairperson, I think I'll stop there, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Yes, we can clap. Thank you very much, Dr. Yankees. Thanks very much for being considerate on our time as well. You did so well. We will not discuss that now. Please note your questions and clarities. But I think I will have to, Dr. Myateza, I think, I will have to know as to when he actually wants to leave, so that we can push responses to this one, so that we don't hold him back. Okay. Now we will, I think whilst they are checking, let us deal with that presentation so that we don't hold him. Whilst they are checking on the technicality and the connection of the virtual presentation. So I think they can do that whilst we deal with the questions. I would now allow time for the questions on this presentation so that Doc can be free to leave. Remember, Doc, there might have been some issues yesterday from yesterday that were referred to you. I will now note members that want to ask questions on that presentation only. Please do me a favor. Even if you thought of something that you didn't ask yesterday in the previous presentations, don't ask it now. Ask questions only on this presentation. It's Doc that can say that he wants to touch on certain things that were asked yesterday. I'm noting hands. Doc, I think I can release you. There seem to be no hands. Maybe you're very deep. Oh, okay. Honorable Pillay, you are number one. It's only me that didn't sleep last night, so it must be me that is not fresh. All of you, you should be fresh. Because mna bendigwetya intambo apha ngo-COC. No more questions. Then, Doc, it looks like you are doing so well in the Eastern Cape. One question only. Over to you, Doc. Oh, yeah, sorry. The question, Honorable Pillay, you are the only one?
Yeah. Greetings to you, Chair, and the honorable members. I think, Doctor, this is the legislature. They say we should say the truth. Whenever you change your presentation, and if it is not our hands, it always gives it difficult to ask questions. I mean, that's a fact. Again, this one is not really a question. You see, your presentation is talking about the Acts of 2009, and the Section 15 is making, one of the determination is that you must have a budget office. That's what is, if I understand your presentation correctly, that's what I'm learning. If that is the case, even here, when we are dealing with the money bills and the related act, automatically we are talking about a budget office within the provincial legislature. That should be the right direction we'll be moving. And now, if I look at your office, 2 policy analysts, 2 financial analysts, 2 economy analysts, and you got, whether you are happy with that particular complex composition of the office, it's very huge. But when it comes to the provincial legislature, because there is a particular slide you are saying that South Africa, India, and other countries, we are not able to influence to amend the budget. In fact, this money bill, actually we are discussing is that how we are finding ways and means to amend the bill. It means that this kind of a composition, is it possible to have in a provincial legislature while still we do not have enough researchers, enough people to support us? Because that budget office does not have these 3 people. And I read it carefully when you were saying that it's only dealing with 2 financial bills and 2 appropriation bills. It means that it is very complex and very technical. So if the funding is supposed to come from this budget, and yesterday you heard from Honorable Dabeni how he was explaining that how much little budget we have in this. And is it possible, because all these positions, you got 3 deputy directors, it's a huge office in terms of when someone looks and to replicate that one in a provincial level. So is that possible, Secondly, and that is the last question on this, the influence of, we are discussing here money bills. And the ultimate objective is we should be able to amend. But every time the presentation, all your presentations are posing a question, can we influence amendment? Is it possible? You see, you are prepared to do something, but again, from your highest office, which you had an experience since 2019, that still the question is, can we do it? It actually takes away the belief that this money bill, can it be a ceremonious marriage where there is nothing happening? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Ndalweni.
Yeah, thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Good morning to you. Good morning to all honorable members in the House, and good morning to all the presenters and officials. Honorable Chair, sorry to raise my hand after you said you are closing. ngoba ndinexhala ndihleli apha ecawa Honorable Matiwane ndeza le nto kuthiwa kuvukelo. Honorable Chair, I just wanted to ask one question. Whether is there any precedence that we can learn from the national, whether it's NCOP or national parliament, where an amendment was ever effected into the budget? That's one question that I have, but just one comment, Honorable Chair. I think the comments made yesterday, even we still stand by them even on this presentation to say the amendment with the capacity we have got researchers that are there now. It's just that the committee needs to be beefed up. The amendment is possible with the current establishment we have, Honorable Chair. I just don't want us to ask whether is it possible or not. It's possible. With the capacity we have now, it's possible. But what we need to do is that, because the committee is new, in terms of the allocation of officials that must be assigned to the newly established committee, that should be done. That will include affecting the organizational structure of the legislature, as it were. If it means additional staff. But in the current situation, we do have the capacity that can work on any proposal that the committee will see it fit. Mnasihlalo sendipha implementation of the act, that we must now move towards the implementation of the signed legislation that gives powers to amend the budget in view of the deliberations of yesterday. Thanks, Chair.
Before I give you Honorable Luana, the honorable members, before I give you Honorable Luana, I think there is something that thank you, Chief Whip. I think there is something that I forgot. Honorable Maqhubela, Honorable Dlelanga, and Honorable Dayal are in the policy meeting. Because us starting early also affected their time. So they said that they might join us later. I have already spoken with the Chief Whip around that. Over to you, Doc. Before you come, there seems to be a tunukal at hand there. Just a minute, Honorable Luana, whilst he is standing here. He will take your question.
Thank you, Chairperson. Indeed, it is a Tunakala incident. Good morning to yourself and the honorable members, our guest, as well as the presenter, Dr. Janj. Chair, indeed, I thought that I would not say anything necessarily. There has been a lot of intensive engagement with this process. Right from the beginning up until the bill itself, when it was promulgated by the province. Chair, you know, taking from Honorable Chairperson of Finance, Honorable Dabeni, as well as Honorable Pillay, I'm stuck with two things, if not one. Let me confine myself to one. That there is an ideal and the real situation. And if one really puts thoughts around the applicability of the bill itself insofar as the amendments that would have to be kicked in if that was to happen now or say in the next financial year. I'm just making an example, Chair, that we are confronted with a budget that stems from our macroeconomic strategy. Ne? And the budget that we view as entirely not talking to the confrontations of our communities and generally the challenges that are facing the development trajectory of our country. And I'm imagining then when that process would have occurred, how much of managing the tension that may exist between the executive, who are at the forefront of the budgetary process, versus the legislators. Even if that happens at a national assembly, so to speak. And I'm thinking of also of how do we mitigate those, because there is absolutely no way that they may not arise. And we have seen in our situation here when we were moving with this bill itself, that there were doubts and also some areas that were viewed as maybe fault lines on the part of our colleagues in the executive. However, we managed to convince one another to arrive at this level. I don't know, Doc, how much of that using your experience, but also learning from other countries that would have taken the route that we are embarking on. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, over to you.
Thank you so much, Chair and members. I think, you know, the tensions were already created in the Constitution, you know, 1994, to say the legislature will hold oversight, executive oversight. You know, that is already there. So it's easy to deal with them in that regard. You know, but I think honourable members are right, Chair. You know, I like asking this question about budget office in a very different way, to say anybody who becomes in this role is often a very difficult role because, you know, my colleagues in other countries, actually, some of them have, you know, seen this as a career-limiting space to take the role of leading budget office. Because what happens is that you are, in a way, put on collision with the policies of government, in a way. Not collision, but maybe it's a strong word, but you are critical of what the policies of government are, because the budget is a policy intentions of government, and it's a political statement, political wishes, and so on. So when you take this role, you are asked to advise on that, and that's a very difficult space to be in. I'm coming back to the questions that raised my members. And my sense, my experience, we have experienced those difficulties. I've experienced a lot of that, my predecessor has. But I think, as I said earlier on, having a political champion matters a lot, because understanding that there's a lot of contestations around these issues. Talk about macroeconomic understanding and situations, that is contested even in literature, you know, that what works, what doesn't work. And when we come advise you as well, we tell you with evidence that what government proposes won't work. In that itself, it creates a bit of a huge contestation within the space. And in many instances, we have differed with the proposals of government, and we've provided evidence of why we've differed with that, and in many senses we've seen outcomes actually talking to what we have proposed. So, it's always good to make sure that, we back our advice to you with such a very strong, evidence, and also recognizing that government goes through a lot of pain to propose these measures. And when we advise you as legislatures, it's a different stage altogether of the budget process, and we have to be very rigor and understanding that we are saying the Minister of Finance proposals actually will not be realized, for example. That's a very big statement. So in that space, the committees has protected us, the legislature, the speaker, the executive authority, and members have protected us to say, this officer advises us, or these are the support structure. And we have differed, by the way, with the committees in our advices. I remember there was one particular case where we told the committees that they must not approve the proposal of extending the incentives on employment incentives in 2014 or 2015, because we thought there wasn't evidence that it is working to create more jobs for more young people and so on, and which became true later on that it wasn't actually working. And the committee went on to say, look, we hear you people, but we are going ahead and that is why also the issue of independence comes important in that sense, that you should allow us to give you our advice, and it's your decision as a committee to decide where you're going with that advice and so on. And that's why obviously in the literature, it becomes so important to have technically capable individuals in space as well. And I've sensed that, I feel that one way of trying to disable this office is not giving it resources, obviously, and that we've suffered that a lot as well. And the honorable member says the office is big. Actually, I think it's very small. My proposal is to expand it quite a lot to be more to support functionals in our role that we do, given the need of the oversight capacity. But I think, it's true. In my view, you don't have to wait for the full office to be in place. When the office started, there was only a director and a PA and one office manager. He did the work alone. He summarized, but of course, it's an issue of biting what you can chew, not biting quite big, because at the end of the day, you can be more targeted to say, okay, there's a particular area that worries you, us as a legislature, let's hammer on that. And obviously, I believe in work determining the capacity, not the other way around. As you get more work, as you realize which capacity you need where, and so on. And that's what we have went about capacity in this office. And I was saying to Dr. Nyataz and the secretary yesterday, look, and also there's a need to be regular briefs which we send to members, which they see the need of or the capacity of this role that takes place. So in a way, I think that justifies and provide for legislature to propose amendment. I think one of the mistakes, in my view, what is done by national parliament around these issues is that, around particular amendment, is that national has placed upon itself to justify why there's a need for amendment. And my view, it's not for legislature to justify. It's for executive to justify why shouldn't there be an amendment. For example, the issue of VAT increases in 2018, someone mentioned VAT increase in 2018. Government should have justified what would be the impact of that increase to the low-income households or to the economy and so on. But now, because of the dynamics then, of course, I must also be careful how do I put this. Parliament decided to put it upon itself to justify why they would reject the proposals or why would they amend the proposals. And I would say, no, you don't have to. Government has to justify why they want to increase VAT and how will that impact service delivered, how will that impact household. And I think in my view, amendment within that context to say, to Treasury to say, look, you want to propose this amount of money, but we want this. Tell us why we can't have that. That will also expand your capacity within, as a part of our side, to say they must justify to you, not you justifying to them that they must make amendments and so on. And that, in my view, can allow you to even make amendments tomorrow. But of course, you need that buffer zone where you say, you have done this work, which shows you that within that context, you can propose that it become a two-way thing. Because at the end of the day, what I like about how government has responded over the act over the years is that they've also been more proactive. One example is around the fees must fall. Complaints by kids from the universities and so on, which they came to Parliament 2015. I remember that Minister Onene was supposed to present a MTBPS statement, and they pushed the wall. They wanted to, there was so chaos. But what has happened already? Government, and we had proposed earlier on that there's a need to make amendments to the budget to make provisions for the requests and all of that, because Parliament had asked us to provide advice on that. But